My name is Olivia Grace Carter. I am 27 years old, and I never imagined one afternoon could upend my world. It was June 15, 2024, when I stepped into Mr. Thompson's law office. Its mahogany panels gleaming under harsh lights. The air smelled of polished wood and old books. A single envelope rested on the glass-topped desk, addressed in my grandmother's elegant script. My pulse thundered against my ribcage as I reached out, fingers trembling to break the seal. Cold beads of sweat formed at my temples. Inside, a typed document revealed that I had inherited $50,000 in cash and $200,000 more earmarked for my education. $250,000 in total. Memories of her music lessons and laughter flooded my mind. Yet an unsettling hush fell over the room. Shadows seemed to lengthen around me, the ticking of the clock sounding like a countdown. As I carefully lifted the page, a sentence sent a chill down my spine. I caught my breath. I knew nothing was the same. I've always believed that home is more than a place. It's a feeling that lingers long after you leave. Growing up at my grandmother's estate in New Jersey, I felt enveloped in warmth and music from the moment I opened my eyes each morning. The house itself was worth roughly $1,200,000, 0 cents, with tall columns framing the front entrance and a slate roof that chimed softly in the wind. Inside, sunlight danced across hardwood floors as it filtered through lace curtains. The memory that always comes first is her piano. I can still run my fingers across those ivory keys, recalling the precise way she'd guide my small hands to play Chopin's Prelude in E minor for the very first time. Grandma Margaret, who we all called Nana, believed in teaching through storytelling. After each lesson, she'd whisk me out to the koi pond behind the house. Beneath the weeping willow, fish with scales like burnished copper and jade glided in crystal-clear water. She'd speak of our family's past, the founding of our town by a great-great-uncle, the struggles they overcame, and the sacrifices made so that I could have opportunities she'd never dreamed of at 27 herself. Sundays were reserved for scholarship talks. Nana had gifted me a $50,000 0 cents fund when I graduated high school, enough to pay tuition and still have spending money for textbooks and late-night coffees at the campus cafe. I remember the day she handed me the bank statement in her study, where leather-bound law books towered above her antique desk. "Education is the greatest legacy," she said, her voice steady despite arthritis that knotted her fingers. At the time, I was more excited about being 18 than understanding the weight of her words. Now, after June 15, 2024, I grasp how prescient she truly was. But even as relief washed over me, a new apprehension gnawed at my core. Michael's scheme had been vast and deliberate. Could there be more players, more hidden transactions? Victoria's phone buzzed. A message from her investigator reading, "Found offshore account transfers, $150,000, 0 cents to Cayman entity, Maple Trust Solutions." I exchanged a glance with Victoria, eyes wide. My mother, William, often joined us after work. She worked as a marketing executive in Manhattan and would arrive in her navy blue sedan, breathless from the commute but radiant when she saw Nana and me dancing. One evening, over a dinner of baked salmon and asparagus, she told me to cherish these moments. "When you look back, you'll realize it wasn't the grand celebration, but the small traditions that shaped you." I nodded, thinking only of the next day's homework. Now I wish I'd paid closer attention. In the winter months, the estate transformed into a crystal wonderland. Snow blanketed the sloping lawn, and Nana would wrap me in a cashmere scarf before we trudged outside to feed cardinals and blue jays. She taught me how to identify each call, the sharp chip of the cardinal, the warbling song of the blue jay. Later, we'd warm ourselves by a roaring fireplace, sipping hot cocoa topped with whipped cream. The firelight danced on her lined face as she recounted tales of my father, William Clark, as a boy. How he built snow forts and slid down hills on wooden sleds painted bright red. I'd listen, imagining his laughter joining ours. Education and dance weren't the only gifts she gave. In my bedroom hung a framed newspaper clipping from the Burlington County Times, featuring a story she wrote about volunteering at the local library. The article praised her generosity and community spirit. At 27, she'd already founded a literacy program that reached hundreds of children each year. When I asked why she made time for that on top of managing her investments, she said, "True wealth is measured by what you give, not what you keep." Those late summer nights, I'd sit on Nana's porch swing, dangling my feet over the grass, and she'd press a handkerchief to my forehead if I felt feverish. She told me about her own grandmother's struggles during the Depression, how she learned resilience when money was scarce. I'd drift to sleep to the hum of cicadas and her soft lullaby, a melody she composed herself. Yet amid that tapestry of love and learning, there were hints of unease, slender threads of tension between Nana and her brother, Uncle Michael. I noticed them once in the corner of the formal dining room, exchanging terse words over a ledger. Their voices were hushed, but I caught the phrase "misplaced funds" before I was ushered away with a plate of Dolnai cheesecake. At the time, I shrugged it off as adult worries. In retrospect, that was the first flicker of trouble I chose not to see. Despite that undercurrent, those years were my sanctuary. When I went off to a small liberal arts college in Pennsylvania, I carried her teachings in my suitcase: the importance of melody, the rhythm of salsa, the humbling power of service. I studied piano with a conservatory professor, earned a 3.8 GPA, and formed light 9 study sessions fueled by Nana's peppermint tea recipe. I returned home each holiday to the same porch swing, the same koi pond, and the same unwavering love. On the last 4th of July we spent together, fireworks bloomed overhead like enormous dahlias of light. Nana squeezed my hand, her eyes reflecting the bursts of red and blue. "Olivia, promise me you'll always seek harmony in life, even when the world feels dissonant." I nodded, tears pricking my eyes without understanding why. And then, on June 15, 2024, I found myself back in that mahogany-paneled office, the echo of that promise still ringing in my ears. As I stand here now, memories swirling like dust motes in a late afternoon sunbeam, I feel a knot of anxiety tighten. A secret in the past threatens to shatter everything she built, and I'm the only one who can unearth it. I thought inheriting my grandmother's estate would bring closure, but instead, I found questions. A week after the will reading, I sat in her study combing through her financial records, hoping to understand the full scope of her generosity. The leather-bound ledgers lay open on the antique oak desk. Margaret had kept meticulous notes. At first, the numbers aligned with what Mr. Thompson had read: cash distributions, trust allocations, scholarship funds. But then I paused, finger tracing a line, a $75,000, 0 cents entry simply labeled medical expenses. My breath caught. Grandma had never been hospitalized for that amount. Her last appendix surgery cost less than $10,000. 0 cents. Insurance covering most of it. I closed the ledger and ran my hand through my hair. The room smelled of old paper and lavender sachets. Outside, the afternoon sun slanted through stained glass windows, painting the floor in ruby and amber. My chest tightened. I slid the ledger toward me and flipped to her hospital correspondence folder. The envelopes were there, but the paperwork was missing, replaced by blank sheets. Whoever handled her estate must have removed them. That night, I lay awake on the guest room mattress, its springs creaking beneath me. Shadows from the wrought iron headboard danced on the walls. I replayed our last conversation in my mind. She'd mentioned feeling unwell but insisted on attending my college graduation. I remembered the tentative tremor in her voice. I chalked it up to nerves. Now it felt like a warning I'd ignored. The next morning, I hired a private investigator named Jack Munrell. His retainer fee was $5,000, 0 cents, which I wired from the trust account, depleting part of my cash inheritance, but worth it to get answers. Jack arrived at dawn in an unmarked sedan. He had a trimmed beard, wire-rimmed glasses, and a calm but serious demeanor. Over coffee in my grandmother's sunroom, he agreed to review her medical providers, staff payments, and any off-the-books transfers. I watched him pack her files into a secure briefcase and felt a pang of apprehension. Once this was out of my hands, whatever we uncovered could devastate the family. 3 days later, Jack sent an encrypted file containing excerpts from security camera footage. I sat alone in the dimness of my apartment in Jersey City, headphones on as I watched frame by frame. At 2:17 a.m. on April 22, less than a month before Grandma Margaret's death, a shadowy figure in a tailored suit slipped through the back gate of her property. The camera's night vision revealed a tall man, accent broad, posture confident, carrying a leather portfolio. He paused by the koi pond, then entered the house through the servant's entrance. The time stare glowed in sickly green numbers. I rewound and watched again. The man's gait was familiar. My pulse pounded so loudly I could hear it in my ears, as I recognized his silhouette. Uncle Michael. My phone buzzed. A text from Jack from bank transfers to Michael's account labeled consulting fees. Total, $100,000, 0 cents. I stared at the screen, disbelief turning to fury. Consulting fees. For what? My grandmother's chart showed no consulting relationship with Michael. He was her brother, not a medical professional. Even worse, Michael stood to inherit substantially if the will were contested or delayed. I confronted Michael 2 days later during a family meeting called by Mr. Thompson in the study. The walls felt claustrophobic, lined with shelves of legal volumes. Sunlight filtered through Venetian blinds, casting lines across his pinstripe suit. His eyes darted when I presented the footage. "That was a private matter, Liv," he said, voice too casual. "I was there to help her. You know how much she respected my counsel." My lip curled. "Counsel for what?" I challenged. He shrugged. "Estate planning. Medical emergencies. You weren't meant to see that." I felt the room spin. My grandmother had trusted Michael implicitly. How had I overlooked this betrayal? I stormed out, the heavy wooden door slamming behind me. The echo reverberated through the halls, as if the house itself protested. In my car, I dialed Jack. "Get me every email, every text, every transfer between Michael and any of Nana's accounts. Go back 2 years." My voice trembled, but my resolve steeled. That night, I lay out all the documents on my kitchen table. Bank statements, security stills, emails. Each piece pointed to one truth. Michael orchestrated a covert campaign to siphon funds. But why? Greed alone seemed too crude. My grandmother had enough wealth to keep him comfortable. He didn't need this level of deception to live comfortably in Manhattan. I wondered if deeper resentments, old slights, sibling jealousy lay beneath the surface. My phone chimed with a new message from Jack. "Check the ledger again." I found an unrecorded entry dated May 3, 2023. $25,000, 0 cents payment to ESE. Consulting. No such company exists. My heart thudded. If that payment was real, someone created a shell company. A company he controlled, perhaps. I traced the name online but got nothing. It was as though the entry existed only on that page. At midnight, I returned to the mansion alone, heart hammering against my ribs. I slipped through the back gate, flashlight in hand, and navigated the overgrown path to the study window. Inside, I saw the empty ledger on the desk. The pages lay open, as if daring me to look deeper. Kneeling in the damp grass, I peered through the glass. The room was empty except for my grandmother's portraits and the silent piano in the corner. I spotted a slip of paper beneath a stack of books, a note in Margaret's neat cursive, "Trust no one but Olivia." My breath caught, and goosebumps rose on my arms. She must have suspected something before she died. My vision blurred with tears and anger. The wind rustled the koi pond's surface, sending ripples across the moonlit water. I tucked the note into my pocket and backed away, mind racing with possibilities. Standing under the great oak tree by the driveway, I realized the estate held more secrets than I ever imagined. In that moment, I understood the inheritance was more than money. It was a labyrinth of hidden debts and betrayals. And as I gazed at the dark silhouette of the mansion behind me, I knew my grandmother's legacy, and possibly her life, had been compromised by someone within our own bloodline. I could feel the weight of every eye in the conference room as I stepped forward, envelope of damning evidence in hand. Mr. Thompson sat at the head of the long mahogany table, his face an impassive mask, while Uncle Michael lounged at the opposite end, fingers drumming against the leather armrest of his chair. Sunlight filtered through Venetian blinds, striping the floor with golden bars that sliced across Michael's tailored charcoal suit. I swallowed hard, fighting the tremor in my voice as I cleared my throat. "Michael," I said, forcing calm, "you told me those $100,000, 0 cents in consulting fees, were legitimate. But I have proof you siphoned that money from Grandma's estate." I slid a glossy printout across the table, an email chain Victorious Barnes, our opposing counsel, had uncovered. The subject line read, "Transfer confirmation, ESS Consulting." The body detailed Michael's instructions to Mr. Thompson to delay recording those funds in the will. My heart pounded as I watched Michael's facade crack. Across from him, Mr. Thompson's lips twitched. I met his gaze and saw guilt flicker in his eyes. He'd always been my grandmother's trusted lawyer until he cashed that $20,000 0 cents check from Michael's account. On the printout, Victoria had highlighted a scanned copy of the check, annotated in Michael's handwriting. "Attorney fees, proudly Alora. Enter unless." The destroyed bank ledger entry bore Mr. Thompson's not-so-secret endorsement. "How do you explain this?" I challenged. My voice echoed in the silent room. Michael leaned back, exhaling slowly, eyes cold. "Liv," he began, using the nickname he knew would disarm me. "You don't understand the full context. I was helping your grandmother manage unexpected medical crises. Thompson here agreed to keep it off the books for her privacy." He gestured at the printout. "Nothing illegal, just discreet." I shook my head. "Discreet? You redirected her own money and paid him to keep silent." Relief and rage warred in me as I recalled the $75,000, 0 cents, medical line in her ledger. I looked to Victoria, sitting quietly in a corner, her expression steely. She nodded once, and I knew she was ready to speak. Before I could press further, a new voice cut through the tension. "I believe there's one more document you should see." Victoria stood, striding to my side and extending a tablet. On its screen glowed a PDF, an email dated March 2, 2024, from Michael to a shadowy address at Highbridge Finance. Subject, loan advance request. The message read, "Urgent. Disperse $50,000, 0 cents, to E cent, collateral to be repaid from estate. My breath hitched. A high-interest loan? Michael had secretly borrowed against Grandma's future inheritance. Michael's eyes widened, and color drained from his cheeks. He opened his mouth, but no sound came. Even Mr. Thompson shifted uncomfortably, adjusting his tie. He had never disclosed this to me or any other heir. "What is this?" I whispered, my voice thick. Victoria tapped the screen. The next page displayed the wire confirmation from Highbridge Finance. $50,000, 0 cents, sent 2 nights before Grandma's funeral. A collective gasp broke the hush. Uncle Michael rose to his feet, face furious. "Liv, you have no right," he began, but I cut him off. "I have every right. This was our grandmother's money. You gambled it away, borrowed more against her name, then bribed Thompson to cover it up." My words landed like gavel strikes. I felt the room tilt as Michael's mask slipped completely. "You weren't protecting her. You were profiting from her death." Suddenly, Mr. Thompson stood, pale and resolute. "That's enough, Michael." His voice trembled as he reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a yellowed manila folder. "I'd intended to keep this sealed until the estate audit, but silence can become complicity." He slapped the folder onto the table. "Inside are my notes detailing every unauthorized transaction I facilitated for $20,000. 0 cents. This office agreed to falsify records on your behalf." Michael's face contorted. "You promised me discretion," he hissed. Thompson's eyes glowed with remorse. "I promised your grandmother discretion, not your deceit. When you handed me that check, I believed I was protecting her. Now I see I was protecting you." My hands shook with a mixture of triumph and disbelief. The same man who had been my family's guardian had chosen greed over loyalty and nearly destroyed everything my grandmother had built. I looked at Victoria, at Mr. Thompson, then back to Michael, who stood motionless, the air around him heavy with defeat. I took a slow breath. "I will ensure every cent taken unlawfully is returned. And you, Michael, will answer to the courts for your crimes." My voice rang with resolve. Michael's shoulders slumped, the reality of exposure extinguishing any fight he might muster. But even as relief washed over me, a new apprehension gnawed at my core. Michael's scheme had been vast and deliberate. Could there be more players, more hidden transactions? Redoria's phone buzzed. A message from her investigator, reading, "Recounts on transfers $150,000, 0 cents, to Cayman entity Maple Trust Solutions." I exchanged a glance with Victoria, eyes wide. Mr. Thompson sank back into his chair, burying his face in his hands. I don't know where that money went." His admission sounded like a prayer lost in a storm. I clenched my fists, determined not to let another betrayal slip through. As Michael slid from the room, shoulders hunched, I realized the war was far from over. The envelope now contained more than just proof of one man's greed. It held the trigger for a larger conspiracy. I rose, stacking the documents with trembling hands. The files thumped against the wood like a warning. "Trust no one." I squared my shoulders and faced the silent room. "This is just the beginning," I declared. "We're going to uncover every last secret." And as the blinds rattled in the sudden gust from the open window, I understood that revenge was no longer merely a reaction. It was a path I had chosen. A path that might demand sacrifices I had yet to imagine. I sank into the cold leather of the hospital recliner, each breath a battle against a tightening chest. The steady beep of the heart monitor echoed my pounding pulse. Every thump a reminder of the betrayal that had brought me here. Overhead, fluorescent lights glared, sterile white, probing every shadow. Sophie Riley hovered with a cool compress pressed to my forehead, whispering urgent words I could scarcely hear over the roar in my ears. I glanced at the small screen on her cart, $12,000 already on the emergency bill for less than 24 hours of care. My collapse had begun the moment Victoria's message arrived. Offshore transfers to Maple Trust Solutions, $150,000. 0 cents. I'd felt the room tilt, the faces of everyone I trusted sliding into masks of indifference. I remembered standing in the conference room, heart hammering, as video footage confirmed Uncle Michael's guilt. I had taken one step forward, and the world had gone dark. Paramedics had rushed in. I tasted antiseptic and fear as they loaded me onto a stretcher, the straps biting into my arms. Sophie rode beside me, fingers cool against my wrist, murmuring, "You're safe now, Olivia. We'll get you stable." Each pulse in my wrist felt like a war drum, demanding action. In the back of the ambulance, the city lights blurred into streaks. I clutched a crumpled printout of bank statements and security stills, the paper damp with my tears. The driver's voice crackled over the radio. Estimated arrival, 2 minutes. I closed my eyes, imagining the koi pond at Nana's estate, glimmering scales beneath the moonlight before I was ripped back to the screech of tires and the slam of the gurney doors. Inside the ER, the antiseptic aroma was overwhelming. Nurses and doctors moved with rehearsed precision, inserting an IV and taking vitals. A doctor with tired eyes pressed a stethoscope to my back, and I flinched at the cold metal. Sophie squeezed my hand. "Breathe with me," she coached, inhaling slowly and exhaling. I tried to match her rhythm, counting each breath, grounding myself against the panic. As the medicine eased the tremor in my limbs, I drifted toward sleep, only to find myself in a vivid nightmare. I stood in the foyer of Nana's mansion, the marble floors gleaming beneath a chandelier of crystal prisms. Grandmother Margaret appeared at the top of the staircase, her elegant posture radiating strength. I called out to her, but before she could answer, the ledger in her hand burst into flames. Smoke curled skyward, and the firelight warped her face into a mask of sorrow. She pointed one slender finger at me, her voice barely audible. "Protect what matters." Behind her, Uncle Michael's silhouette dissolved into tendrils of smoke. Then darkness swallowed the scene. I jolted awake, sweat dampening my hair, heart racing like a jackhammer. Sophie was there, pressing a damp cloth to my brow. "It's okay, Olivia, you had a nightmare." I blinked, trying to piece together reality. The beeping monitor and the flicker of fluorescent tubes were confirmation enough. Sophie helped me sit upright and drew the thin curtain for privacy. "You're stable," she said softly, glancing at the chart by my bed. "Blood pressure's down, heart rate slowing." I forced a nod and wiped my eyes. "Thank you," I whispered. But inside, devastation churned. Betrayal had broken me, broken my trust, broken my body, broken my faith that family meant safety. I closed my eyes and pictured Nana's hands clasped around mine on the porch swing, the cool breeze rustling leaves overhead. I remembered her words after our salsa lesson, when she told me life would lead me through both joy and hardship. "Keep moving," she'd said, "even when the music stops." Right now, I felt stranded in silence. Hours passed in a haze of tests and whispers I couldn't fully focus on. Sophie slipped out briefly, returning with a thin hospital folder. "I brought your phone," she said, setting it on my bedside table. I stared at the screen. A text from Jack. Tracking transfers. Found encrypted emails linking Maple Trust to a shell company in the British Virgin Islands. Another pulse of panic surged through me, but I willed it down. If I fell apart now, I'd lose my only advantage, clarity. I tapped out a reply. Keep digging. Any connection to Michael or Thompson. My fingers trembled, but I pressed send. Then I turned to Sophie. I want every record you have, bills, notes, everything from last night. Sophie nodded, retrieving a clipboard with medical records and my statements from the paramedics. I scanned the sheet. Time of collapse, paramedic observations, heart rate peaking at 150 bp. A doctor poked his head beyond the curtain. Miss Carter, you've been through a lot today. I need to monitor you overnight, but you should rest now. He offered a kind smile before slipping away. Drew the curtain closed fully. I lay back, exhaustion and adrenaline waging war in my veins. I reached under my pillow and pulled out the note I'd found beneath Nano's books. Trust no one but Olivia. My breath caught. That message felt like a direct charge from beyond the grave. She had sensed danger that had carried into her final days. I clutched the scrap of paper to my chest and closed my eyes, tears slipping freely. Night deepened around me. The rhythmic beep of the monitor became a lullaby and a countdown. I promised myself I would not let Nana's legacy burn away in lies. I would not allow Uncle Michael's greed or Mr. Thompson's complicity to define her story. A hush fell over the ward. I stared at the sliver of dark sky visible through the blinds, a single star shining defiantly. In that moment, I felt both fragile and ferocious. I knew that rebuilding would require more than healing my body. It would demand that I unravel every layer of deceit. I pressed the call button. Sophie returned immediately. Yes, Olivia, she asked, voice gentle. I need a pen, I said, and when she handed me one, I scrawled on the note, find out who financed Maple Trust, every partner, every cent. I folded it and slipped it into Sophie's hand. Promise me you'll get this to Jack. Her eyes softened. I promise. We exchanged a look of solidarity, doctor and patient, guardian and avenger. The night watch nurse dimmed the lights outside my curtain, leaving me in shadow and resolve. As I lay back, pulse steadier now, I realized something. The collapse had peeled away my illusions. I was no longer a frightened heiress waiting for answers. I was the one who would find them. And even as fatigue washed over me, I felt a spark ignite deep within, an ember of determination too bright to be extinguished. The next chapter awaited. We would be ready. Recovery would begin not just with medicine, but with the unbreakable will to fight back. I emerged from the hospital into a crisp July morning, determination forging through the remnants of my panic. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel Johnson, my lifelong friend and steadfast ally. Liv, I'm on my way. Got coffee and my notebook. Let's strategize. Relief pulsed through me. Daniel had known my grandmother and me since we were children, building sandcastles in her koi pond garden. Within the hour, he parked his silver sedan outside the estate gate, where I waited, still in my hospital gown and hoodie. He hopped out, arms loaded with iced lattes and a legal pad bulging with observations. Morning warrior, he said, handing me a paper cup. Sophie filled me in. Offshore account, Shell Company, Cayman connections, it's big. I sipped the coffee, its bitter warmth grounding me. It is, but I'm done running. Let's figure out how to trace Maple Trust Solutions back to Michael. Daniel nodded, flipping open his notebook. First step. Follow the money flow. I've mapped the bank transfers you sent. Next, we need to subpoena Highbridge finance records. We'll work with Victoria to get those. I pulled out. Sure enough, a message from Victoria Barnes awaited. Court hearing scheduled next week. I filed motions to compel Highbridge records. Pack your running shoes, this is a marathon. I texted her a thumbs up emoji. Then I turned to Daniel. Let's move. After a quick exchange of hugs, Daniel and I jogged through the wrought iron gates into the winding estate driveway. By the time we reached my car, I felt the rush of adrenaline sharpen my focus. At 27, I'd faced finals, recitals, and heartache, but this was different. This was a fight for justice. Later that afternoon, I laced up my sneakers and headed to Central Park. The city's skyline framed the path, and joggers passed me in a blur of neon shirts and earbuds. Each stride felt like a defiance: run faster, chase the truth. I settled into a rhythm, inhaling the summer scent of cut grass and gasoline. After 2 miles, I slowed to a walk and found a quiet bench near the reservoir. I closed my eyes and practiced the guided breathing Sophie taught me. Inhale for 4 counts, hold for 2, exhale for 6. My shoulders dropped, tension seeping away. I visualized the shell company's paper trail dissolving in the wind, leaving only clarity behind. Opening my eyes, I snapped a photo of the skyline and texted Victoria on it. Breathing now. Let me know when court docs are ready. By early evening, I met Chloe Morgan at her apartment in Hoboken. Chloe, my cousin and co-heir, had been surprisingly calm through the upheaval. We sat on her balcony overlooking the Hudson, sipping herbal tea. Seriously, Olivia, she said, stirring a hint of blue butterfly pea flower in her cup. You look healthier already. I forced a smile. Running helps, and talking to Daniel does too, but I need to liquidate something else, fast. Chloe raised an eyebrow. What did you have in mind? My Honda Civic, I said, voice steady. I paid it off last year. It's worth about $8,000, 0 cents. I plan to sell it tomorrow and funnel the proceeds into legal fees. Chloe nodded approvingly. You're smart. I'll post the listing on AutoTrader and Craigslist tonight. I have a client who might take it off your hands by morning. I felt a surge of gratitude. Thanks, Chloe. I don't know what I'd do without you. She reached over and squeezed my hand. We're family. We stick together. That night, back in my bedroom, I cleared a space on my desk for the mound of paperwork. Court filings, bank statements, Victoria's emails, Daniel's notes. I booted up my laptop and joined a video call with Victoria and Daniel. Status update, I asked, folding my hands. Victoria's face appeared, professional yet compassionate. Judge approved our subpoena. Highbridge must hand over outbound wire records by Friday. We're also contesting the trust documentation to include any hidden codicils. Daniel chimed in. I cross-referenced the $150,000, 0 cents transfer dates with stock trades by a Maple Trust subsidiary. There's a spike in oil futures the same week, but we may have fuel money laundering angle. I frowned and thought. That's significant. If we tie Michael to market manipulation, it raises the stakes. But we have to be careful. This is a family matter that could explode in the press. Victoria nodded. Agreed. We need airtight evidence before going public. For now, focus on clear paper trails. As the call ended, I sat back and exhaled. The path ahead was steep, but for the first time in days, I felt momentum. I reached for my journal and jot down 3 priorities. List the Honda Civic and secure $8,000, 0 cents by morning. Analyze Highbridge subpoena documents upon arrival. Developed narrative linking Maple Trust transfers to Michael's brokerage account. I closed the journal and turned out my lamp. In the quiet darkness, I replayed Nana's words. Keep moving, even when the music stops. Each breath carried purpose. The next morning, the Honda sold within hours for a full $8,000, 0 cents. Chloe delivered a check wedged inside a champagne-colored envelope. I tucked it into my legal folder and drove to Victoria's office, determination in every mile. As I stepped into her conference room, I felt the tension of the last week crystallize into resolve. Victoria stood by the windows, a stack of high-bridge documents on the table. "We have them," she announced. "Let's see what Michael didn't want us to see." I took a deep breath, ready for the next phase of this battle. My heart felt steady now, no longer racing with fear, but pounding with conviction. And as Victoria slid the first set of wire records across the table, I knew one thing for certain. Revived by determination, I understood that the next move would change everything. I never imagined a courtroom could feel like a coliseum until I walked in that morning. The deadline Victoria set had arrived. We were to present every piece of evidence against Uncle Michael before Judge Ramirez and an audience packed with nearly 200 curious spectators, including reporters, family members, and local attorneys. I stood at the front of the courtroom in my charcoal gray suit, palms pressed against the glossy surface of my briefcase, heart hammering with purpose. Victoria Barnes rose first, her heels clicking on the polished floor as she approached the lectern. She held up the pre-signed codicil, a single sheet in Margaret's unmistakable cursive that effectively nullified any claim Michael might have had. "Your Honor," she said, voice unwavering. This codicil was drafted on May 1, 2024, and signed by Margaret Clark in the presence of 2 independent witnesses. She handed the document to the bailiff, who passed it to Judge Ramirez. The judge's eyes narrowed as he scanned the text. Olivia's inheritance was now undisputed under this new amendment. Then Victoria turned to the security footage. A large screen flickered to life behind us, showing the night vision recording of Michael slipping through the back gate. The timestamp was clear, April 22, 2024, at 2:17 evening. Gasps rippled through the courtroom as each attendee recognized his silhouette. Michael sat rigidly in the front row, lips pressed into a thin line. I felt a twinge of satisfaction as Victoria paused the video on the moment his hand hovered over the koi pond, and again as he approached the servants' entrance. Next came the bribe evidence. I stepped forward, releasing the damning printouts from my briefcase and placing them on the evidence table. "These email change," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline, "outline a $20,000, 0 cents, transfer from Michael Clark to Mr. Thompson, our family's lawyer, in direct exchange for suppressing legitimate estate records." I clicked the remote, and the highlighted passages glowed on the screen. The courtroom murmured, the reporters furiously scribbled notes. Uncle Michael's head snapped up. His eyes locked on me, and for a moment, I saw panic flicker there. He swallowed hard, attempting to regain composure. "Miss Carter," he said, voice strained, This is manufactured evidence." His lawyer jumped to his feet, but Judge Ramirez raised a hand for silence. "Mr. Carter," the judge said, voice low and authoritative, "these are court-submitted exhibits. You will have the opportunity to contest their authenticity, but for now, I recognize their admissibility." Michael's jaw clenched, and he sank back into his seat. As the room settled, I glanced at Mr. Thompson, who sat beside Michael. His face was pale, framed by beads of sweat. I caught his eye for an instant. He looked every bit the accomplice he'd been. A pang of betrayal washed over me, but I steeled myself against it. This day belonged to justice, not to my pain. Then came the moment I had secretly orchestrated. Michael had underestimated the press. Earlier that morning, Daniel and I had drafted a mock press release under the guise of the New York Herald, designed to appear as a teaser headline. "Sister vs. Brother. Family fortune on trial as inheritance scandal unfolds." At precisely the time of our hearing, a flurry of text messages and emails hit every reporter in attendance. A reporter's phone buzzed. She glanced down, eyes widening, and tapped her notepaper. In that instant, the courtroom atmosphere shifted. Cameras discreetly appeared, lenses trained on Michael's every move. I noticed the flash of a smartphone camera and realized that the entire spectacle was now live tweeted under the hashtag Clark Estate Scandal. Michael's composure cracked further. His shoulders hunched as he heard the soft pings of incoming notification. Immediately, Victoria seized on the moment. She directed the judge's attention back to the codicil. "Your Honor, given the public impact evidenced by media coverage and the clear preponderance of proof, we request the court to expedite this decision." Judge Ramirez nodded thoughtfully. Then, in a dramatic twist of fate, Michael reached into his jacket pocket, perhaps to retrieve a document or phone, and accidentally knocked over a courtroom camera perched on a small tripod. The camera teetered, then crashed to the floor with a metallic clang, its red record light blinking ominously. The sudden noise caused a collective gasp. Michael froze, eyes wide as if caught red-handed once more. I felt the tension snap. Reporters craned their necks. Even court officers turned to watch. Michael's lawyer attempted to stand and salvage decorum, but his voice was drowned by the echo of the crash. Judge Ramirez banged his gavel, demanding order, but the moment had cemented itself in everyone's mind. Michael was unraveling. After a brief recess for the judge to restore order, the hearing resumed. The judge announced he would take the case under advisement and deliver his ruling tomorrow morning, an unusually rapid turnaround for a matter of this magnitude. As the gavel fell, murmurs filled the air about potential criminal referrals and restitution orders. I stayed seated until the room emptied. Michael rose to leave, shoulders slumped, as my gaze followed him. Despite everything, I felt no triumph in his defeat, only the weight of responsibility. I gathered my documents and approached Victoria and Daniel in the hallway. "We did it," I whispered. "We've forced his hand." Daniel clapped me on the back. "You led with strength. Tomorrow we'll set the record straight." Victoria folded her arms, eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "This is a major victory, but we're not done. There could be more hidden codicils, more shell entities. We need to prepare for appeals." I nodded. "Agreed. Let's review every piece of paper on my grandmother's desk again." As we stepped outside into the cool evening air, I felt a new energy coursing through me. The city lights shimmered, and I realized how far I'd come from the terrified heiress who collapsed in an ambulance to the woman who could stand her ground in a packed courtroom. But even in that moment of triumph, I sensed that the final chapter was still unwritten. The codicil and the camera crash were monumental, but Michael's desperation hinted at deeper secrets. I took a steadying breath and looked at my allies. But turning the tables was just the opening gambit. Even as the estate battle raged, a quieter story was unfolding alongside my crusade. Daniel Johnson and Chloe Morgan, my closest confidants and secret sweethearts, had found unexpected solace in each other's company. I'd watched them exchange shy glances over strategy sessions in my grandmother's study, their laughter a soft counterpoint to my mounting anxieties. Late-night phone calls became video chats filled with knowing smiles, and soon they admitted to me between sips of chamomile tea and whisper pep talks that they'd fallen in love amid the chaos, determined to build something positive from the turmoil. Daniel and Chloe decided to open a cafe in Hoboken, a reflection of their shared passions. They found a corner store with exposed brick walls and large bay windows that caught the morning sun. Rent was steep at $3,500 per month, but they pooled resources, Daniel's savings plus a $15,000 microloan. confident they could make it work. I remember tasting their signature lavender latte on opening day, velvety steamed milk infused with a hint of floral sweetness, topped with a delicate sprig of lavender. The first customers, early morning commuters, lined up before the door even unlocked. By the end of that inaugural month, their books told an encouraging story. $12,000. 0 cents in revenue. Just enough to cover overhead and pay their first part-time barista. The cafe's playlist of mellow jazz and soft acoustic covers drifted through the warm amber glow of Edison bulbs, creating a cocoon of calm. Chloe hand-painted the menu board in elegant script, listing house-made scones and Daniel's experimental cold brew blends. On weekday afternoons, neighborhood writers and students claimed the corner booth, laptops balanced on wooden tables beside half-empty cups of house-roasted espresso. Their success wasn't just financial, it was restorative. Watching them share proud smiles over balancing the day's ledgers reminded me why I fought so hard to protect the possibility of new beginnings. One evening, Daniel invited me for a pastry and declared, "This cafe will be our legacy, proof that love and hard work can flourish, even in the shadows of betrayal." Chloe raised her cup in agreement, her eyes shining. And it's only the beginning. I returned home that night with renewed hope. If they could transform a vacant storefront into a thriving community hub, then the same spirit of perseverance could expose every last secret behind Maple Trust Solutions and bring true justice to our family's name. Meanwhile, a small business's triumph hinted at the power of unity and how that unity would soon tip the balance of power in court. The courtroom was packed again, but this time the air felt different, less charged with anticipation, more weighed by finality. Judge Ramirez entered, donned in his black robe, and took his seat beneath the high ceiling of polished oak. I sat beside Victoria Barnes, hands folded tightly in my lap. Opposite, Uncle Michael looked smaller somehow, his shoulders hunched beneath the glare of courtroom lights. "Michael Clark," the judge began, voice steady. "In light of overwhelming evidence of estate fraud, bribery, and concealment of assets, this court finds you liable for restitution in the amount of $150,000, 0 cents plus interest. Further, I refer your case to the district attorney for criminal proceedings." A hush fell. The clerk recorded the order. Then the judge continued. "Mr. Thompson, on account of your actions facilitating this fraud, the court revokes your license to practice law in the state of New Jersey." Mr. Thompson's face paled. He looked as though he might sink through the bench. I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Justice felt slow in motion, but it had arrived. Michael rose, pale and trembling. His lawyer whispered urgently, but Michael's gaze flicked to me. For a moment, I saw regret, or perhaps a plea for mercy, before his eyes darted away. As we filtered out into the corridor, a storm of camera flashes erupted. Reporters and paparazzi crowded the hallway, microphones thrust forward. "Ms. Carter, do you have a statement?" "Mr. Clark, how do you respond to restitution orders? Will you pursue criminal charges?" I shielded my eyes against the bright bulbs, but managed to nod toward Victoria. She steered me toward an exit leading to the street. Outside, New Jersey sunshine felt surreal against the chaos of flashes and shouted questions. I huddled beside Daniel, who'd come straight from Chloe's cafe, tie loosened and brow furrowed. He extended an arm to guide me through the mob. A photographer's voice cut above the rest. "Olivia, will you negotiate a settlement to spare your family further scandal?" I thought of Nana's final note, "Protect what matters." I squared my shoulders. "No," I said into the nearest microphone. "I intend to see every last detail exposed. This matter isn't over until all accounts are settled fairly." A ripple of astonishment passed through the press. Michael emerged behind us, flanked by court officers. He glanced at me with hollow eyes. His tailored suit now looked ill-fitting, as though he occupied a man he no longer recognized. He avoided the cameras, escorted instead toward a black SUV idling curbside. That evening, I watched televised news coverage on my living room TV. A ticker scroll read, "Clark family feud. Restitution ordered. Lawyer disbarred." The lead story showed a stunned Michael, head bowed, entering the SUV. Next, a field report from Maple Street. Sources say Michael Clark has listed his Willowbrook townhouse, valued at $650,000, 0 cents for immediate sale to cover legal fees and restitution. Neighbors report moving vans at dawn. I sank onto the couch, heart heavy with vindication and sadness. Just after midnight, my phone buzzed. It was Chloe. "Daniel and I closed the cafe early. Can I bring you some coffee and cookies?" I typed back yes, craving the simple normalcy they offered. Minutes later, there was a knock, and Chloe handed me a to-go cup of their lavender latte. The familiar floral warmth settled something in my chest. Daniel appeared behind her, holding a manila envelope. "This came from the county clerk," he said. I opened it to find a certified copy of the court's order and a note, "Pending criminal referral paperwork." That night, I stood on my balcony overlooking the estate gates, the koi pond's surface still reflecting the moon. The house was quiet, as though slumbering after months of turmoil. I thought of the battles fought in these rooms and hallways, each lie uncovered, each secret exposed. Then I remembered Victoria's warning: appeals could delay enforcement. I turned back inside and penned a list in my journal: confirm sale status of Willowbrook townhouse, monitor criminal filing deadlines, prepare statement for scholarship fund announcement. As I closed the journal, a faint knock sounded at my door. Daniel opened it to reveal a tall man in a dark suit, Detective Harris from the district attorney's office. His expression was grave. "Miss Carter," he said, "we need to discuss additional findings in this investigation." My heart pounded again. Even now there were more secrets to unearth. I exchanged a glance with Daniel and Chloe, who stood protectively behind me. Then I nodded. "Of course," I said, steeling myself for whatever lay ahead. As Detective Harris stepped inside and closed the door, I realized the final reckoning was not yet at hand. Restitution and disbarment were just part of the downfall true justice would demand. One last revelation, and as the door clicked shut, I knew the greatest betrayal still waited to be brought into the light. I stood on the marble steps of St. Mark's Chapel, the morning sun glinting off the stained glass windows, as guests gathered for my grandmother's memorial and the launch of the Margaret Clark Scholarship Fund. Just 2 weeks after the courtroom's final judgments, justice had delivered $150,000, 0 cents in restitution, Mr. Thompson's disbarment, and the dissolution of Maple Trust Solutions. Today I would honor Nana by committing the full $250,000, 0 cents in her name, and the remainder to maintain her beloved koi pond garden. My heart pounded as I adjusted the microphone on the podium. Before me stood 200 familiar faces: family, friends, school administrators, scholarship recipients, and even some former neighbors who recalled Nana's library programs. The air was crisp early October and our burn leaves drifted along the pavement. I took a deep breath and began. "Good morning. I'm Olivia Grace Carter, Nana's granddaughter and the steward of her legacy." A hush fell. My grandmother taught me that true wealth lies not in accumulation, but in generosity. Her gift to me was not only her estate, but her unwavering belief in education and community. I paused, scanning the crowd for Chloe and Daniel, who stood near the back, holding hands. I held up a framed copy of the original will. On June 15, 2024, I received this letter, never imagining the storms it would unleash, but through betrayal and heartbreak, I discovered the depth of her foresight. She knew I would need to become strong enough to protect her dreams. A soft warmth spread through my chest as I looked at the scholarship recipients. College freshmen clutching oversized checks, eyes bright with possibility. As of today, I continued, we are awarding 10 scholarships of $10,000, 0 cents each, to students from underprivileged backgrounds, exactly how Nana would have wanted. The remaining $150,000, 0 cents, will fund community initiatives, jazz workshops in her memory, literacy programs in local schools, and the preservation of her koi pond and rose garden for public enjoyment. I felt tears sting my eyes, because her legacy is more than bricks and mortar, it's hope, opportunity, and the harmony she found in every note of her piano. When I finished, applause rippled through the gathering. I stepped down and mingled, shaking hands with scholarship winners who shared their dreams. One aspiring teacher, another a marine biologist, a third hoping to start a community garden. Each conversation reminded me why this struggle had been worth every sacrifice. Later, Chloe and Daniel escorted me to the koi pond garden, where koi fish swirled beneath a wooden footbridge. Edison lanterns hung from willow branches, lending a golden glow even in daytime. Chloe handed me a small photo album she'd compiled snapshots of Nana teaching me piano, salsa dancing under string lights, reading winter tales by the fireplace. I traced the images with reverent fingers, memories flooding back. Daniel placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. I nodded, swallowing a lump in my throat. I'm proud we kept her vision alive. As the ceremony wound down, I excused myself and walked toward the rose garden at the estate's rear. The roses were in full bloom, deep crimson petals edged with gold. I knelt and let my fingers brush the dew-soaked leaves. The scent was intoxicating, grounding me in the moment. Golden sunlight filtered through maples in peak autumn color. I rose and strolled beneath the canopy, relishing the crunch of leaves beneath my boots. I reflected on the journey, the shock of betrayal when I uncovered the $75,000, 0 cents irregularity, the terror of the collapse, the courtroom battles, and the final reckoning that brought justice not only to my grandmother's name, but to my own shattered faith. In that peaceful afternoon light, I realized the true lesson Nana intended. It wasn't vengeance, but resilience. It wasn't anger, but compassion. Though I had navigated a labyrinth of deceit, the path led not to bitterness, but to renewal. I understood now that every challenge was a chord in life's complex melody, sometimes dissonant, but part of a greater harmony. When I reached the rose arbor, I paused and looked back toward the chapel. The wind shifted, carrying the faint strains of a piano melody, perhaps from the jazz workshop in progress. The notes seemed to float on the breeze, a gift from Nana's legacy. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Thank you." For the inheritance, yes, but more for the lessons she embedded in every page of her life. As dusk approached, I made my way back to the estate's front lawn, where Daniel and Chloe waited with steaming mugs of lavender-infused tea. We watched as guests departed under string lights, casting long shadows on the lawn. Chloe lifted her cup in a silent toast. Daniel echoed the gesture. I joined them, the three of us united by grief, purpose, and hope. I sipped the tea, its floral warmth filling me with calm. Beneath us, the koi pond reflected the twinkling lanterns like stars on water. In that moment, I knew the future held unknown trials and perhaps temptations to stray from the path of integrity. but I also knew I had the strength to meet them. I had kept moving when the music stopped. And so, with her melody echoing in my heart, I stepped forward, ready to compose the rest of my story.